Laws concerning factory farming. Arguments to implement animal cruelty laws in U.S. The now common practice of factory farming has led to a significant epidemic of sickness that affects the emotional, psychological, and physiological well-being of the U.S. populations. Most family farms have been replaced with industrial farming owned by corporations. Deplorable practices concerning the welfare and inhumane treatment of livestock have been the cause of unhealthy Americans for decades now. With so much information becoming available to the consumer in the last 15 years via the internet, many prosecutors are now taking on the task of supporting organizations like PETA and the ASPCA to regulate these corporations and develop methods to pass legislation that would reverse the adverse effects of factory farming. Law concerning animal cruelty up for debate. Joseph Vining makes a solid argument in his journal Animal Cruelty and Factory Farming Laws to support the implications of early criminal protection acts in Anglo-American law that were directed specifically at the suffering of farm animals. He argues a persuasive case promoting the enforcement of animal cruelty laws on corporations involving the factory farming practices. Until recently, very little progress had been made to hold corporations accountable for the inhumane treatment of livestock in factory farming operations. However, Vining believes recent development in corporate bylaws are beneficial in supporting his cause. Vining makes mention of these laws passed in 1980s and 1990s on the criminal liability of organizations. These liabilities have caused courts to recognize corporations as separate entities and ultimately hold these organizations to the same judicial standards as an individual citizen in the U.S. population. The idea is if an individual can be criminally prosecuted for inhumane treatment to farm animals, then corporations are now in the position to be equally liable. However, the intent is not so much to impose criminal punishment as it is to change the mindset of organizations engaged in farming practices. The current model in the business sector is pure profit maximization. The hefty fines were to be placed on industrial farming malpractice. Then business would have no choice but to amend such practices and protect the bottom line. Humane farm animal care. Arguments to prosecute corporations in violation of animal cruelty laws have been heard. Some organizations are heeding the warning of refocusing the agenda concerning the treatment of livestock. Humane Farm Animal Care is the first and only nonprofit organization to develop industry-independent, scientifically sound standards that protect the welfare of animals involved in the food production process. HFCA offers a certification and labeling program to ensure those animals providing meat, dairy, eggs, and poultry to consumers are raised according to HFAC animal care standards from birth to slaughter. These standards would ensure animals raised in factory farms were treated humanely. Corporations are now seeing the result of such measures affecting their bottom lines and mindsets of some corporations are refocused to include the HFAC labeling program. Efforts to silence journalists concerning factory farming. In light of the progress, many corporations are hard at work to maintain the status quo of factory farming practices. A push to pass legislation that prohibits journalists from applying for level entry positions at factory farms is now on the table. The Ag Law, as reported in The Atlantic, makes it a criminal offense to lie on the job applications for journalists to ensure positions within factory farming organizations to expose animal cruelty and detrimental sanitary issues. Exposing such practices have been a major force in the movement to change standard industrial farming procedures. Many corporations see these journalistic efforts as extremely dangerous and will diligently pursue earmarks and legislation to hinder the process. It is apparent the animal cruelty laws should uphold corporations to ethics standards. It is no longer a matter of conscience, but of the U.S. health. Maintaining current practices will only lead to a more disease and recalls within the nation's food supply. Pressuring the bottom line of businesses within the industrial farming sectors is a logical approach to changing how farm animals are treated in this country and the promise of a healthy future in America for generations to come.